Templeton Woods sits on the northwestern outskirts of Dundee, Scotland's fourth largest city. It covers more than 150 acres of mixed woodland, planted in the early 1800s by the head forester to the first Earl of Camperdown. It is a place of paths and clearings, dense undergrowth and tall trees, popular with dog walkers, joggers and families. In the daytime, in good weather, it is an ordinary, unremarkable woodland on the edge of a Scottish city. In the late 1970s, it became the site of two unsolved murders that haunt Dundee to this day. Carol Lannon was born in Dundee in 1961. She was the youngest of 5 children. Her father, whose name was Lannon, had been sent to prison when Carol was still young. He was serving 18 months in Peterhead prison for theft when his wife Christina met someone else and the marriage ended. He left Dundee in 1971 and moved back to his hometown of Bradford. He lost all contact with his children and did not learn of Carol's death until 2005, 26 years after she was murdered. Her mother, Christina, later married Thomas McCluskey, who became Carol's stepfather. Carol's childhood was not easy. She was placed in care for part of her early years. At school, she was described by those who knew her as a loner, a girl with very few friends. She struggled. She grew up in a city that could be hard and unforgiving for those on its margins. By the time she was 18, Carol was living in Hill Street in Dundee. She had a baby, a son named Derek, just 3 months old in the spring of 1979. Her brother Mick was looking after Derek on the night she was killed. Police believed Carol was working as a prostitute in Dundee's red light district. Her family have always disputed this firmly. They say she was not a sex worker. They say she was in a relationship with Derek's father and that the two of them intended to marry. Whatever the truth of her circumstances, Carol Lannon was 18 years old. She was a mother. She was somebody's daughter and somebody's sister. And on the evening of 20th of March 1979, she left her home in Hill Street by taxi, heading into Dundee city centre. The driver of that taxi was never traced. At around 8 o'clock that evening, a witness saw Carol at the junction of Exchange Street and Commercial Street, the heart of the city's red light district. She was seen getting into a red Ford Cortina estate car. She got into the passenger seat. The car drove away. It was the last time anyone saw Carol Lannon alive. The following afternoon, on 21st March 1979, 2 young people walking in Templeton Woods came across a body lying in the undergrowth. It was partially covered by snow. The body was naked. It was Carol Lannon. She had been strangled. Tayside police launched the largest murder investigation they had ever mounted. The driver of the red Ford Cortina was described by the witness as a man aged between 25 and 30, of thin build, with a pale complexion, short dark hair, sideburns, and a mustache. Police issued a photo fit, the first time Dundee officers had ever taken such a measure. More than 6,000 owners of red Ford Cortinas across Scotland were visited and questioned. Over 7,000 people were interviewed in connection with the case. Every hotel, boarding house, and guest house in the area was checked. Nothing led to an arrest. 11 days after Carol's body was found, her handbag and items of clothing were discovered 85 miles from Dundee, on the banks of the River Don near Kintore in Aberdeenshire. Inside the bag was money and a family allowance book for her child, Derek. The night her body had been found, there had been heavy snow and the roads were treacherous. The question that haunted investigators was one they could never answer. If the killer lived in Dundee, why did he drive 85 miles in those conditions to dispose of her belongings? Carol Lannon was buried at Balgay Cemetery on 31st March 1979. Her mother Christina and stepfather Thomas McCluskey were among the large gathering at the graveside. Her son Derek was 3 months old. The case went cold. Her killer was never found. 11 months passed. Elizabeth McCabe was born in Dundee on 27 February 1959. She was the eldest of 4 children born to Anne and Jim McCabe. The family lived at Lyndhurst Avenue in Loch Ee, a suburb of Dundee. Elizabeth was, by every account of those who knew her, a quiet and gentle young woman. She was deeply devoted to her family. She rarely went out, barely drank, and was cautious about accepting lifts from strangers. After leaving school at the age of 16, Elizabeth began working as a nursery assistant. By 1980, she was training to become a fully qualified nursery nurse. She loved working with children. Colleagues described her as gentle and caring. Her mother, Anne, described her as home-loving. She had a good relationship with her parents, enjoyed her job, and looking forward to her 21st birthday on 27 February 1980. In the 3 or 4 months before her death, something had changed. Elizabeth had started to go out occasionally, to pubs, to clubs, to the kind of social life she had never really pursued before. Nobody has ever fully explained why. It was new for her. It was out of character. On the evening of Sunday, 10th February 1980, Elizabeth left her home in Lyndhurst Avenue for a night out with her close friend, Sandra Niven. The two visited several city centre bars before ending up at Teaser's Disco on Union Street. Sandra later told police that at some point during the evening, she had found Elizabeth in the bathroom of the club, crying. Elizabeth told her she felt that no one found her attractive, that no one liked her. Sandra tried to reassure her. By the time they were ready to leave the club, the mood had lifted. At around 12:30 in the morning, Sandra went to collect her coat from the cloakroom. Elizabeth already had hers on and was ready to go. They agreed to meet outside and share a taxi home. When Sandra came out of the club, Elizabeth was not there. She looked up and down the street. She checked the entrance. She looked for her friend. Elizabeth was gone. Sandra assumed she had left with a former boyfriend who had also been in the club that night. Sandra went home. The following morning, Sandra arrived late for her 7 o'clock start at the nursery where she and Elizabeth both worked. Elizabeth should have been at college that morning, so Sandra did not expect to see her. But when Sandra got home that evening and there was no message from Elizabeth, she called the McCabe household. Elizabeth had not come home. She had not been there at all. Jim and Anne McCabe reported their daughter missing on 11th February 1980. They were immediately alarmed. This was not like Elizabeth. This was completely out of character. Mr. and Mrs. McCabe began searching the city themselves, visiting Elizabeth's favourite places, appealing to local newspapers, doing everything they could to find their daughter. Police searched. Days passed. The city of Dundee, still unsettled by the murder of Carol Lannon in those same woods 11 months earlier, grew anxious and afraid. A week went by, then another. 16 days after Elizabeth disappeared, on 26 February 1980, 2 men hunting rabbits with their dogs in Templeton Woods found a body in a small clearing in the undergrowth. A dark blue jumper had been draped over the woman's shoulders. Branches had been piled on top of her to conceal her. She was partially naked. Her shoes, gloves, and handbag were missing. It was Elizabeth McCabe. She had been strangled. The clearing where her body lay was only 150 yards from the spot where Carol Lannon's body had been found 11 months before. It was the day before Elizabeth's 21st birthday. A post-mortem confirmed that Elizabeth had died from asphyxia due to compression of her neck. A later review of the evidence concluded she had likely been killed during a struggle or a sexual assault. Items of her clothing were found on Coupar Angus Road in the city in the days that followed. On 2nd April 1980, Elizabeth's jewellery, shoes and a photograph belonging to her were recovered from Cobden Street. Jim McCabe and Elizabeth's younger sister Evelyn appeared in the press, appealing for information. Anne McCabe, Elizabeth's mother, had already contacted the Courier newspaper in desperation, asking for help in finding her daughter. They had done everything right. They had reported her missing immediately. They had searched the city. They had cooperated fully with police. Tayside Police launched one of the largest manhunts in Scottish police history. The taxi trade became a key focus of the investigation, since Elizabeth had last been seen in the city centre late at night. 2 witnesses reported seeing a Ford Cortina with a taxi sign on it emerging from a road leading to Templeton Woods on the night Elizabeth disappeared. They reported that the driver appeared to be alone in the car with the interior lights on, and that he appeared to be driving with his wrists as though he had dirty hands and did not want to touch the steering wheel. The witnesses identified the car as belonging to Vincent Simpson, a taxi driver who ran a small taxi company in the village of Newtile near Dundee and drove a Ford Cortina. Simpson was first interviewed on 2nd March 1980. He admitted being in Templeton Woods on the night Elizabeth disappeared. He said he had walked his dog there at around 10 o'clock in the evening and had returned later to try to steal from a car he had seen in the woods. He had a criminal record stretching back to childhood and was a heavy gambling addict. He also voluntarily told police something else about himself, that he was a peeping Tom who regularly used binoculars to spy on courting couples in Templeton Woods. Despite this, there was no solid evidence linking him directly to the murder, and he was released without charge. The original investigation was later criticized for serious failings. Evidence had been mishandled. There were allegations of witness intimidation. In their desperation for answers, investigating officers attended a séance on 13th March 1980. The medium provided information. It led nowhere. The case went cold. Years passed. Then, decades. In 2004, the case was reopened under Operation Trinity, a joint investigation by 3 Scottish police forces into 7 unsolved murders of young women. Serial killer Angus Sinclair was identified as a potential suspect. It was quickly established that Sinclair had been in prison when both Carol and Elizabeth were murdered. He was definitively eliminated. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, was also briefly considered in Carol's case and eliminated. Carol's death did not bear the characteristic markings of a Sutcliffe attack. The reopening of the McCabe case led to new DNA analysis of the evidence. Items from the crime scene were sent to a laboratory for testing. The results were striking. DNA found on the dark blue jumper that had been draped over Elizabeth's body produced matches to Vincent Simpson. Swabs taken from 3 different areas of the jumper all matched his DNA profile. The chances of the DNA on the right-hand side of the jumper's neck belonging to anyone other than Simpson were estimated at 1 in 320,000. A hair found on plastic sheeting used to move Elizabeth's body to the mortuary in 1980 also matched Simpson's DNA profile, with a 1 in 1,300 chance of it belonging to someone else. In July 2005, Tayside police officers travelled to Camberley in Surrey, where Simpson was now living, and arrested him. He was charged with the murder of Elizabeth McCabe. Simpson's trial began at Edinburgh High Court before Lord Kinclaven on 22nd October 2007. It lasted 7 weeks. The DNA evidence was central to the prosecution's case, but the defense argued that the original investigation in 1980 had been so badly compromised. Evidence contaminated, protective clothing not worn when the body was removed from the woods, the crime scene poorly managed, that the reliability of any forensic material from the case was fundamentally in question. The jury heard both arguments. On 13th December 2007, the jury returned a majority verdict of not guilty. Vincent Simpson walked out of court. With a quiet thank you, he left by the side door and went free. Police said they were not looking for anyone else. Both murders remain officially unsolved. In the years since, attention has focused on another figure. Author Alexander McGregor, who reported on both cases as a journalist at the time, and criminologist Professor David Wilson have examined a man named Andrew Hunter. Hunter was a social worker in Dundee who had moved to the city from the west of Scotland in 1977, just 2 years before Carol Lannon was killed. He worked for a Salvation Army children's home and had regular contact with young people in the care system. Professor Wilson has noted that Carol Lannon had herself been in care, and that Hunter therefore may have known her through that connection. Hunter drove a red Ford Cortina. His physical description closely matched the photo fit issued by police of the man seen driving away with Carol Lannon on the night of 20th March 1979. During the course of a murder trial in 1988, it emerged that Hunter had regularly and extensively used the services of prostitutes in Dundee city centre. In 1988, Andrew Hunter was convicted at Dundee High Court of the murder of his wife Linda. He had strangled her with the lead of her pet dog following an argument. He then concealed her body in woodland near Ladybank in Fife and spent months playing the role of the grieving husband, making public appeals for her return, cooperating with police, even participating in a BBC Crime Watch reconstruction of her last known movements. Her remains were not found for 6 months. Hunter was jailed for life. Andrew Hunter died of a heart attack in Perth prison on 19th of July 1993. He was 41 years old. Whatever he knew died with him. In a Channel 4 documentary broadcast in 2023, Professor David Wilson and author Alexander McGregor named Hunter as the most likely suspect in the murder of Carol Lannon. It is their belief, based on circumstantial evidence, the photo fit, the red Ford Cortina, his known use of prostitutes in Dundee, and his later conviction for strangling a woman in Woodland, that Andrew Hunter killed Carol Lannon. No one has ever been charged with Carol's murder. As for whether Carol Lannon and Elizabeth McCabe were killed by the same person, police have concluded they were likely looking for 2 different killers. The question has never been definitively settled. What is known is this: Carol Lannon was 18 years old. She had a 3-month-old son named Derek. Her mother Christina raised Derek as her own after Carol was killed. Derek grew up without his mother. In 2016, by then 37 years old, he spoke publicly about his life and his search for justice. He said he had struggled to cope with the death of his grandmother Christina, who passed away in 2011, knowing she had gone to her grave without ever seeing her daughter's killer found. He said he just wished someone who knew something would come forward, so they could both rest in peace. Elizabeth McCabe was 20 years old. She was the eldest daughter of Anne and Jim McCabe. She had 3 younger siblings. She loved working with children. She was looking forward to her 21st birthday. She left Teaser's Disco on Union Street in the early hours of 11th February 1980, walked out into the night, and never came home. Both women were found in Templeton Woods. Both were strangled. Their bodies lay 150 yards apart, 11 months apart. Neither murder has ever been solved. Hello everyone, thank you for listening, and drop any feedback below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I hope to see you again in the next case, right here on Cold Case UK.